In the last class, we have started seeing the different types of induction generators that can be used, and he was just giving us the scheme of what is happening in this, how we can use them, all these things, right? So in that we have already seen the this operating point and everything, right, in the last class. So now we will be just going through what are the different types of machines and how these machines can be what are the configurations and different techniques that are used and all those things that we will be seeing. Now, the first thing is the cage rotor induction generator. In this, we have two types of main schemes. That is the control firing angle scheme with AC side capacitor. In the same manner, we have DC side capacitor. Yes, both the sides of capacitor, we have AC side capacitor as well as the DC side capacitor. We will see each of them. Okay. So first thing is the control firing angle scheme with the AC side capacitor. First topic which we will be discussing. So here it is giving us a brief description of what is what. Let us see. A method to obtain DC power at a controllable voltage from a variable speed generation system is shown in the figure 6.2. So let us see what is that. Here he is giving us this total diagram. This is a generalized diagram. So we have a four-cell commuted rectifier connected to an induction machine as well as a capacitor bank. So because the presence of the capacitor bank, it is implied that the induction machine is a self-excited induction machine. And as we can see, this capacitor bank is on the AC side rather than the DC side, because the rectifier output is the DC output, right? But we have the capacitor bank on the AC side of the rectifier. So that is what our heading means. That is AC side capacitor means. Okay. Initially, the necessary self-excitation is provided by the capacitor bank, and the output of the generator is connected to a three-phase control rectifier. That is what we have seen, right? The attention here is focused on controlling the DC voltage, which is of prime importance, by changing the firing angle of the devices instead of changing the capacitor. So basically, what we are doing is we are trying to change the firing angle of this. Sorry. Here, instead of changing, here we need to control this DC voltage, DC side voltage. But the control of the DC side voltage, rather than controlling the capacitor banks, here they are controlling the firing angles of this rectifier, such that we are controlling the DC side voltage by using the firing angles rather than the capacitor bank. That is what he's saying. Okay. When a load is applied there, when a load is applied, there is a fall in the DC voltage level due to the reduction of the in the net excitation by the converter reactive current. So he's saying that whenever we have a load, the DC side voltage will be reduced. To maintain the output voltage required output voltage regulation, the firing angle is advanced. So the basically we are trying to manage the DC side voltage using the firing angles, right? So he's saying that if you want to maintain the firing angle here, we are advancing the firing angle whenever it is required. Okay. And then when the limit is reached, ideally diode bridge operation, the exciting capacitance has to be augmented. So when the limit is reached, when the output voltage regulation limit is reached, then we are going for the capacitance augmentation. We are going to add some of the capacitance to the network. The required change in the delay for maintaining a constant DC voltage is very sensitive to the speed change. So whenever you are changing the delay angle, that will be very sensitive to speed change. That is what he's saying. At a higher speed, when the no load voltages rise sharply, a large delay angle is required for maintaining a constant DC voltage. So as the speed increases and there is no load, and the no load voltages rise sharply, that means the no load voltages are rising, then we need to have a larger delay angle for maintaining a constant DC voltage. If So is just giving us an example for showing us that this delay angle change, whatever the change is there in the delay angle, that is very sensitive to the speed change. Okay, with a fixed excitation capacitor, the useful speed range for a constant DC voltage employing a line commutated controlled rectifier is extremely restricted. So, in order to get this, in order to get this useful speed range for a constant DC voltage, and if we are using a line commuted control rectifier, then we'll be having very less, what do you say, very restricted amount of variation. We can only vary it very restrictedly. That means we'll be having only small amount of, what do you say, variation. We can vary the delay angle in a very small amount. The lower end of the speed range is limited by the minimum excitation speed, and the upper end by the excessive rise in the induced voltage and the large delay angle required. So he is giving us how much, what is this restrictions we have. That is the lower the end of the speed will be the minimum excitation speed. That means minimum excitation speed, the speed at which self excitation can be occurred. That is the minimum self excitation speed. And the upper end is the upper end by the excessive rise in the induced voltage and large delay angle required. So for the upper end, we are having this induced voltage as well as large delay angle, which we need. Those are the upper end bounds, and the lower end bound is the minimum excitation speed. In order to increase the speed range, the capacitance value needs to be changed. So, if you want to increase the speed range, the capacitance value has to be changed. In this regard, the scheme is not self-contained. So, the scheme itself is not a self-contained scheme. We need to have some more other equipment from the outside. To obtain a wide speed range, two or more sets of capacitor banks are needed. That's what we were saying, right? It is not a self-contained, so we need an external help. For that external help, we are going for two or more sets of capacitor banks for that. Therefore, all the basic problems of a self-excited induction generator are partially remedied, but remained unsolved. So here, because of this need of extra equipment and all those things, we'll have these problems which are there for this self-excited induction generator will be partially remedied. That means it can be only controlled, it cannot be removed. That is what he's saying. Next, for the same excitation capacitance, the useful speed range can be increased if a forced commuted rectifier is used in place of a line commuted rectifier. So, instead of using a line commuted rectifier, if we go for a forced commuted rectifier, that gives us a little more speed range to be played with. It assumes sinusoidal converter input voltages, ripple free output current, and ideal switching elements. So this assumes that we whatever we have, it is a sinusoidal converter input voltages. It is assuming that we have sinusoidal converter input voltages as well as ripple free output current. We are giving ripple free output current and ideal switching elements. Okay, advancing the firing angle, that is negative delay angle, produces a capacitive effect in the machine terminals since the rectifier input current now leads the corresponding voltage. As we are if we advance the firing angle, then the total system will act like a capacitive effect. There will be a capacitive effect, and this capacitive effect will be because the input current will be leading, sorry, rectifier input current will be now leading the corresponding voltage, that is the rectifier input voltage. This is in tune with the requirements of a self-excited induction generator. So this technique where we are getting the rectifier input current to lead the rectifier input voltage is how we need for a self-excited induction generator. The effective excitation capacitance must be must increase with the increasing load. So as the load is increasing, we need this effective capacitance which we require, sorry, effective excitation capacitance which we require will also increase. At higher speeds and light loads, the firing angle can be delayed so that the rectifier appears as an equivalent RL load to reduce the effect of VAR supplied to the machine and thereby avoid high voltage at the machine terminals. So at higher speeds, and if we are going for higher speeds as well as light loads, that means the load is very less, then we are going for delaying of the firing angle, such that here we were advancing the firing angle before, right, just to increase the speed exit is all those things, right. Now what we are doing is at higher speeds, at if you are going for higher speeds, then the firing angle is being delayed so that the rectifier has a opposite, what do you say, opposite to whatever we had before. That is, we had a capacitive effect before. Now we are going for an inductive effect. That means such that because of the delaying of the firing angle, the total system will act as an RL load such that the effect of the VAR supplied to the machine will be reduced and thereby avoid high voltage at machine terminal such that the machine is safe. We can go for the safe operation of the machine. So this is giving us the input voltage and the current waveforms. Here you can see that you can see that where is the okay, he is giving us different configurations how the capacitive and the inductive can be done. So if you see, if you are going for the left side, we are having the capacitive effect, that is the angle. If we are going for the negative angle, negative delay angle, then we are getting the capacitive effect. If we are going for the positive delay angle, then we are getting the inductive effect. At each point, if you see okay, if you see for the capacitive effect, then the, as we said in the previous this one, the current will be leading. We can see that, right? Yeah, we can see that the current is leading, rather leading the voltage. Okay, here we have a small what do you say, derivation which is giving us this total circuit model of the self-excited induction generator with a controlled rectifier. You just go through that what do you say, derivation. Okay. Okay, next, the next topic is the inverter or converter system with DC side capacitor. Till now we have seen at the AC side capacitor. Now we are seeing at the DC side capacitor. In conventional self-excited variable speed induction generators with a bank of capacitors connected across the machine terminals, the value of capacitance required is almost inversely proportional to the square of the prime mover speed, calling for impractically large values of the capacitance at low speeds. So he's saying that if we are going for the conventional self excitation, there we the capacitance which we require will be inversely proportional to the square of the prime mover speed. So because of this condition, what happens is we need to have very large values of capacitance at lower speeds. Okay, even then further stages of the power conversion are needed to feed conventional DC or AC loads due to the variable magnitude and frequency of the generator voltage. So okay, if we just avoid that also, even then what happens is we need to feed the conventional DC and AC voltages, AC loads, right. Because of the variable magnitude of frequency and voltage, we need to have power conversion stages. We need to have extra power conversion stages. These problems can be overcome to a large extent by using a power converter with a large DC side capacitor connected between the induction generator and the power bank, the power network. So he's saying that all these things, whichever, whatever the high capacitance or the further stages of power conversion required, all this can be avoided, can be overcome to a large extent by using a power converter with a large DC side capacitor. So we are using a power converter with a DC side capacitor. Okay. This Power conversion equipment comprises two fully controllable pulse width modulated voltage source inverters to provide independent control of the network generated current. So we are having two controllable pulse width PWM voltage source inverters, PWM VSS. Okay, both of them have bidirectional sinusoidal operation. So they can be acted on both sides. That is what he's saying. The power flow into and out of bridge one and the voltage of the DC link can be controlled by controlling the phase and the magnitude of the modulating signal relative to the network voltage. So he's giving us what will happen if you are controlling what parameters. Okay, if you are controlling the if we are able to control this phase and magnitude of the modulating signal, then what happens is we can control the power into as well as out of we can control the power into as well as out of the bridge one, and also control the DC link voltage. This also enables one to derive power from the network to start the turbine in certain wind generator configurations such as with Darius turbine. So because Darius turbine cannot be started, it is not a self-starting turbine, right? We know this. So in order to start the Darius turbine, we need an extra push of starting push of the machine, right? That starting push of the machine can also be derived from the network when we use this type of configuration directly. Bridge 2 can be controlled by conventional scalar variable voltage or variable frequency method or the flux control scheme. So bridge 1, for the bridge 1 these are the schemes. Now the bridge 2, when we come to the bridge 2, we have these two methods, scalar method as well as the flux control scheme. These are also which, I mean, we know all these things, right? Scalar scheme as well as the flux voltage scheme, flux control scheme. The first one is the scalar method. Figure 6.5 shows this control scheme of an induction generator with static inverter system with a DC load and a capacitor. So he is giving us this one is the diagram he was talking about. Here we have a self-excited induction generator with a DC side capacitor and a converter inverter system. Okay, so we have a BWM inverter which is bidirectional as said earlier. We have a capacitance as well as an RL load, as well as a load. And here the triggering signal generation, we have separate this one which is helping us to understand what is the difference between the slip speed as well as the rotor speed, and then giving the appropriate triggering to appropriate devices. And here we also have another parameter which is called as the modulation index, which we have already seen in the previous chapter or somewhere, where this modulation index will be helping. It is an index for the inverters and which will be helping us to understand how this amplitude modulation is being done. Okay. So the frequency of the inverter is adjusted to give a small negative slip. So we are making sure we have a small negative slip. That's what he's saying. Assuming that the capacitor voltage builds up to a steady state value, the working of the system can be described as follows. Okay. So here we are assuming that there is a steady state value where capacitor voltage can be built to a steady state value. The PWM inverter converts the DC voltage into AC voltage, which supplies the necessary magnetizing ampere turns to establish the air gap flux of the machine. So basically, first we are using this PWM inverter to establish the magnetizing flux. Okay. If the slip is made negative, the mechanical power gets converted into electrical power, which through the feedback diodes of the inverter supplies the load across the capacitor. So if you are making the slip negative, then the mechanical power gets converted into electrical power. So the mechanical power gets converted into electrical power and it will be feeding the load. It will be feeding the load. At the same time, it also replenishes the charge that has been drained from the capacitor, because we to make this all the self-exciting situation, we will be having a loaded capacitor, right? So that capacitor load voltage which is being used for this total system will also be replenished here. Okay. An increasing an increasing load tends to decrease the capacitor voltage, which can be compensated by increasing the slip. But these reduce, but this, just a second. Okay, an increase in the load tends to decrease the capacitor voltage, which can be compensated by increasing the slip, that is, reducing the inverter frequency. So if you are, if the load is getting, if the load is increasing, then the capacitor voltage decreases. Okay, the if the load is increasing, the capacitor voltage decreases. The capacitor voltage which is being decreased can be compensated by increasing the slip. So as the capacitor voltage decreases, if you increase the slip, what happens is, the inverter frequency will be reduced. The inverter frequency will be reduced, and the slip will be increasing, and then the capacitor voltage will be compensated. Again, in order to maintain a near constant DC voltage at a reduced prime mover speed, it is necessary to reduce the modulation index of the inverter in proportional to the speed. So we need to make sure that the DC voltage is constant at reduced prime mover speed. Even if the prime mover speed is reduced, we need to make sure that the DC voltage is constant, right? So in order to do all these things, we need to make sure, we need to relatively reduce the modulation index. We need to relatively reduce the modulation index of the inverter. Thus, to have a fairly constant DC voltage for varying loads and the prime mover speeds, the slip as well as the modulation index should be controlled. That is what it means, right? We need to control the slip in order to maintain the what do you say, capacitor voltage and all those things. And in order to maintain near constant DC voltage, we need to make sure that the modulation index will also be is also modified accordingly. So for the total control, we need to make sure that both slip as well as the modulation index are being controlled. Although the output of the system is DC, its near constant value makes it both makes it easier for both supplying it to DC loads and for feeding it to an AC grid system through an inverter. Because we are making sure that the output system, whatever the output we are getting, DC system which we are getting, is a very constant value. It is a very nearly constant value. It is easier for us to supply for the DC loads as well as feed it to the AC grid system through the inverter. It is easier for us to maintain all these things. This system, whatever we have designed, has several advantages. What are those advantages? Let us see. A single large DC capacitor is sufficient instead of several banks of AC capacitors. So, there in the previous discussion, here in the AC side discussion, we have said that. Wait, let me just yeah. Here, if you see here, here it is said that two or more sets of, here, right, two or more sets of capacitor banks are needed. That means whatever the so here in the AC side we need to have many capacitor banks, but because of this type of method, while coming to the DC side, we are happy with single DC side capacitor. If we are happy, we get the control and everything, even by using a single large DC side capacitor. The value of the DC capacitor is not critical provided it is sufficiently large. So here we need not even take the value of the DC capacitor into consideration. That means if it is quite large, then we don't mind how much is the value of the DC capacitor. Okay, so we need, but the only thing is we need to make sure it is sufficiently large. That's all. The output voltage can be maintained constant over a wide range of speeds. Because of these techniques and everything, what the output voltage can be maintained constant over a wide range of speeds. Okay. Uh, Here also we have a small derivation which is showing us the different conditions and all those things. You just go through it. If you have any doubts, I'll explain. Okay. So the next technique is the flux vector scheme. Here, what happens? Let us see. The field-oriented techniques uh, have made possible the development of high-performance AC drives over a large speed range and offer independent control on the torque and the flux. So, if you are going for the field-oriented techniques, then what happens is we are having independent control. Okay, independent control of the torque and the flux, as well as we are having large speed ranges. Okay, AC drives can perform over large speed ranges. As in case of drives, the field oriented principle can be equally applied to improve the dynamic performance of a variable speed wind turbine generator set with independent control on both active and reactive power through PWM current regulated converters. So he's saying that we know that in case of drives, if we have a field oriented system, then it is easier for us to control it and everything. In the same manner, here also, if you are having this field oriented system, then the dynamic performance of the machine can be controlled easily on both active and reactive powers. Both the active and reactive powers can be controlled easily. Okay. The rotor flux oriented system, a very familiar approach in drive, is obtained by accepting the machine rotor flux vector as the d-axis. So we need to we need to take we need to take a vector, right? Here flux vector scheme is the scheme itself is the flux vector scheme. So we need to have a vector. What we are taking which vector are we taking means we are taking the machine rotor flux vector as the d-axis. When we go for the d-axis and q-axis approach, there if you we are taking the d-axis as our main flux flux vector. Okay. It provides excellent decoupled control when the correct rotor parameters are used in the control algorithm. So we need to make sure that correct rotor parameters are given to the control algorithm. Okay. The parameter sensitivity of the rotor flux oriented system affects both the dynamic and the steady state performances of the system when the rotor parameters are not correctly estimated. So, if the rotor parameters are not exactly estimated, then the parameter sensitivity of this rotor flux oriented system will be affecting both the dynamic and the steady state performances. So we need to make sure that we are estimating the parameters correctly because it is a parameter sensitive technique. The dynamic as well as the steady state performances will be affected. These effects become more severe in large machines and in machines operated at reduced flux. So whatever if you are not going for the right parameters estimation, then it might affect us when we are going for a large machine. It will be these effects will be very severe, and the machine uh, and if the machine is operating at reduced flux levels, even then these effects will be very severe. On the other hand, the lower parameter sensitivity of the stator flux orientation technique represents important feature. So, this is when we are going for the rotor flux orientation, right? If you are going for the stator flux orientation, then this parameter sensitivity will be less. Then this parameter sensitivity which we have will be less. Incorrect values of the rotor parameters affect the transient response but have hardly any significant effect on the steady state performance. So if you are taking incorrect values of the rotor parameters, it will affect the transient response. Okay, but the steady state performance will be hardly affected. It won't be affected that much. Orientation to the stator flux offers the advantages of robust flux estimation and direct control of the stator voltage per current, an important aspect in the generation system. So he's saying that if we are going for the stator flux orientation, then it will be having a robust flux system. We can have the advantage of robust flux estimation and direct control of the stator voltage or current, which is very important in case of a generation system. So here we are going for the again we are going for the stator side stator flux estimation. So here also he has given a what do you say derivation which you can go through. Basically, what we are doing is we are trying to make the total system, which in the older or previous discussions we are having a rotor flux oriented system. Now we are converting that into a stator flux oriented system. There will this gives us the components, what are the different components of the stator flux and current vectors in the stationary frame and the stator flux frame. So how they are differing, how they are changing in case of the different systems. He is giving us this phasor diagram, as well as this is the configuration of the stator flux oriented control system. So this is the total configuration that we have. So basically we need to convert the ABC system into DQ system. That is the basic thing which we need to do. And then again in the DQ system also we are taking the D axis as our flux vector. That we need to make sure we understand, and we are going to convert the whole system which was previously a rotor flux system, that is the field oriented system, into a stator flux system. Okay, into a stator flux oriented system. This is the total configuration for the stator flux oriented control system. So the next topic is the doubly fed induction generator. The wound rotor induction machine, commonly known as the doubly fed induction generator, is finding increasing applications, particularly in the megawatt range, in variable speed wind energy conversion systems. So basically, we are wherever we are going to the induction generator, we're going to the doubly fed induction generator. Okay. When compared with the motoring operation, the power handling capability of a wound rotor induction machine as a generator theoretically becomes nearly double. So, if the double-fed induction machine is being used as a generator, then it has almost double capacity as when it is used as a motor. Okay, the rotor of the generator is coupled to a turbine shaft through a generate through a gearbox, so that the standard wound rotor induction machine can be used. This we know, right? The rotor of the generator is always coupled to a gearbox, right? The gear ratio is so chosen that the machine's synchronous speed falls nearly in the middle of the allowable speed range of the turbine. We are making sure that the gear ratio of the machine falls is sorry the gear ratio is so chosen that the machine's synchronous speed falls in the allowable speed range of the turbine, middle of the allowable speed range of the turbine, that is nearly 60 to 110%. Above the rated wind speed, power is limited to the rated value by pitching the blades. We know this, right? Whenever you are going for if the wind speeds are more than the rated wind speeds and you need to control the power, we go for the pitch angle control, that is pitch control of the blades, right? The stator is directly connected to a fixed frequency utility grid, while the rotor collector rings are connected via back-to-back PWM source inverters and a transformer to the same utility grid. The stator will be directly connected to this fixed frequency utility grid. Directly, the stator will be connected. While coming to the rotor, we are going to connect the rotor using using back-to-back PWM voltage source inverters and a transformer. Same for the same utility grid, both of them will be connected, but the rotor will be having rotor collector rings will be having back-to-back PWM voltage source inverters and a transformer. As the rotor power is a fraction of the total power of the generator, a rotor converter uh, near the rotor converter rating of nearly 35% of the rated turbine power is sufficient. So the rotor power is just fraction of the total power. We here the rotor converter rating will be nearly 35% of the rated turbine power. That's all. The rotor side PWM converter is a stator flux based controller that provides independent control of the induction machine's active and reactive power. So, the rotor side PWM converter is a stator flux based converter. So, we will have an independent control of the reactive and active powers. The grid side converter is the DC link voltage regulator that enables power flow to the grid, keeping the DC link voltage level constant. So we have so the rotor side converter will help us to independently control the active and reactive powers, while the grid side converter will help us to keep the DC link voltage level constant. Okay, so this is the doubly fed induction generator. Actually, doubly fed induction generator we have already seen in detail in the last chapter. We have seen, so we are not going into detail of this. This is the thing. Okay. So still we have two more machines which we need to go through. Let me give you the names of those machines. So we still have the wound field synchronous generator and the permanent magnet generator that we'll be seeing in the next class.